I talked about the various revolutions and placed the present revolution in context. I talked about what kind of disruptions that have taken place. I talked about how fast, from 2007 onwards, the kind of developments that we have seen. And then what happens if leaders in the respective fields do not innovate and adapt to the revolutions that are taking place. I'm not only talking about the Homo neanderthals, who did not learn the language and, they disappeared from the planet Earth. Homo sapiens went along with the revolution, learned language, mastered it, and then, although compared to so many species on this planet, human beings are very frail. But cognitive revolution had empowered them to what we call conquer the world. Now look at what happened to some of the leaders. I'll give you 3 examples very briefly. One is Nokia, the other one is BlackBerry, the other one is Kodak. All 3 are leaders, war leaders. Nokia launched its handsets in 1987. It had 40% of market share, 150 billion US dollars valuation capitalization in 2007, just about 11 years ago. By 2014, Nokia's market share declined to 15%, and smartphone segment, their market share was only 3% by 2014. 7 years after 2007 that I talked about. Microsoft bought Nokia for $7 billion. A company which was in 2007 was valued at 150 billion US dollars was bought for $7 billion in 2014. BlackBerry, we're all fans of BlackBerry once upon a time. Research in Motion, RIM, Canadian giant. It launched BlackBerry in 2003 and the world went gaga. First time you could send a mail and the mail at the end of it read, "Sent from my BlackBerry." By mid 2008, the market capitalization was 70 billion US dollars. In 2013, that was 5 years later, just the span of a government. 5 years later, it was sold for $4.9 billion. And you rarely find a BlackBerry. Kodak, once a giant in film, 130-year-old company. Last year, it filed for bankruptcy. You see, today, we are living in 14 nanometer generation. I'm sure some of you do know what is a nanometer. Nanometer is 1 billionth of a meter. 1 billionth of a meter. If you cut a meter into a billion pieces, that's a nanometer. In other words, if you cut a meter length into 100 crore pieces, that is a nanometer. Today we are living in 14 nanometer generation. I'll tell you what it implies. It implies a chip of the size of this fingernail can host on this surface 1 billion transistors. In this, 1 billion transistors are hosted on a fingernail. That is what the age we are living in. You know, when I went to the Silicon Valley, I met Eric Astro Teller. Eric Astro Teller is the technology czar of Google X. Very interesting person. His maternal grandfather was a Nobel laureate, and his paternal grandfather was also a Nobel laureate. It's an old, probably an abandoned or left out kind of a huge supermarket or a garage or something like that they converted into a Google research center. Very informal. Eric Taylor came into the conference room on his skates and sat. And while talking, he gets up to write something on the board and goes to the board skating. And later I was told that he comes home to the office from home on skates and then goes back home from office on skates. That's how he moves around. That's his locomotion. He told a very interesting thing. Look at those two graphs. The one on the left, the line is the human adaptability. How prepared we are to adapt to the changing circumstances, especially the technology. And then the curve which is rising, how fast and rapidly the technology is changing. And in that, the one which is rising, the level or the state of technological progress is the one where we are. The point, the small yellow dot that you see, that's where we are. So there is a gap. If you go to the right side graph, you will see the gap. And he says that gap, if you want to fill it, you need to learn faster and govern smarter. That could be your company, that could be your shop, that could be your department, that could be your college, university, that could be your lab, that could be your industry, that could be your office, or whatever. If you don't do that, if you don't fill that gap, then we'll see Nokias and Blackberries and Kodaks all over. You know what this has done is everything now from analog is converted into digital. Today we have atom goods and digital goods. About 20 years ago, 25 years ago, almost all goods were offline to offline. Today you have a lot of online to online, online to offline, offline to online, and progressively offline to offline goods exchange is rapidly falling. That is what is happening. It's once you digitize, you copy, and it is exactly, there's no loss of quality in the copy. That is what the digitization does. And it is instantaneous. You copy any number and the copy is instant. Sharing is instant. I'm sitting here with my phone and say send, and within about 3 or 4 milliseconds, it is there in the other side of the Atlantic, the west coast of the United States. You see, most of these e-commerce giants, what they tell is that if somebody opens, say, Amazon or Alibaba or Flipkart or some site and say, I want a television, you type television. Within 7 milliseconds, if the choices do not appear, if the options do not appear, the customer goes away. Which means, what does it mean? It means that you click television, it goes to the server, makes a search, then the message comes back into your laptop or a computer or your device. All this happens in 7 milliseconds or under 7 milliseconds. If it is 1 millisecond more than 7 milliseconds, we are not able to retain our customer. This is what the e-commerce people say. So it has to be instantaneous, and the storage is enormous. You see, I remember, probably, Dr. Chakravarti garu, all of you remember, that, when I had 64 KB, phone book, address, telephone number, etc., which we could store, that used to be great. And then somebody came, he went somewhere, Japan or someplace, and then he came back and said, he showed me 128 KB or something. But today my phone is 256 GB. That's the storage. And therefore, that kind of a storage is able to host huge data sets. That's the reason why we're able to talk about big data these days, isn't it? Even huge desktop computers used to have, 1 GB, 2 GB was huge. But today we have, in our mobile phones, we have 256 GB as the memory of the storage. Because you are digitized, because you could store, because you could share and copy and instantly transfer, what you can do is create huge data sets and work out correlations, and do the analytics. And all this, the sharing and copying and storing, is almost at zero cost. It's progressively falling. Even data transfer is becoming cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And faster. And therefore, machine learning has come into the play. Machines are now able to learn things. There's a Chinese game called Go. Have you heard Go? It is 19 into 19 squares. And they worked out that the maximum number of positions that you could have in that is 2 into 10 to the power of 107. What is the number of the atoms? What is the number of atoms that are there in the known universe, the entire universe? 10 to the power of 82. This is 2 into 10 to the power of 107, which means that is the kind of combinations that 19 into 19 Go game can work out. And that is fed into a machine learning, because you have, those giant supercomputers now. They can work out the combinations in a second. That is the enormous computing power, analytical power, storage power, power of sharing, that is there at the command of the human being. Now, what is happening? Is it just in the Silicon Valley and some big corporations? No. Without us knowing, without us realizing what kind of a power we are sitting on, it is seeping all over the world. Today the world's population is 7.5 billion. Out of 7.5 billion, internet users now, as of January 2018, are 4.2 billion. And active social media users are 3.1 billion out of 7.5. Unique mobile users, I have 3 mobile phones, but then I'm considered as one, isn't it? Unique mobile users are 5.1 billion today. So, when you talk about the kind of mobile phone that we wield now, that we carry around, if you look at the scale, if you look at computing power in 1980s or 1990s, the mobile phone that we have now, iPhone 10X, whatever has come, those are almost to the scale of the kind of supercomputers that I just described. That is the kind of power that we carry ourselves. But then, The point here is adaptability. From atom goods, we need to think of the digital goods. The leaders in every field, be it in healthcare, be it in science, be it in laboratories, departments, academia, factories, offices, colleges, everywhere. And there are network goods, there are platform goods, there are information goods. Goods are not just the atom physical goods anymore. The reason why Nokia failed, they thought telephone was a hardware. With iPhone, it is proved that telephone, mobile phone is software. It just hosts, a device hosts a huge amount of software, a huge amount of memory, a huge amount of processing power, a huge amount of chip, powerful chip. That is what it hosts. So unless we transition like Homo sapiens, in contradistinction to Homo Neanderthals, Homo somebody else, unless they transition into cognitive revolution, then agricultural revolution, then industrial 1, industrial 2, industrial 3 and industrial 4, I do not know what is going to happen. The only thing that I could say is, in this context, should a leader escape digital revolution or embrace digital revolution? You have to answer. Thank you.